Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It. My name is Emmanuel Jacobs. I am the Community Relations Officer for the Delaware Development of Disabilities Council. I'm excited to be back. It has been a while since we were able to do a Let's Talk About It, and I'm excited to have Delaware Election Commissioner Anthony Albans with us. Anthony, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks, Manuel. Glad to be back.
So Anthony is back for his second go around at this. So today we are going to be talking about voting for individuals in Delaware, but primarily those with disabilities. Commissioner is going to share some updates and some changes here in Delaware. So before we get into that, Commissioner, can you tell us a little bit about you and your role when it comes to elections here in Delaware?
Sure, thank you. And again, thanks for having me. Glad to be back. And yeah, I'm the state election commissioner. So what that means is I'm the chief elections official for the state. So our department, the Department of Elections, administers voter registration and elections in Delaware. And we manage that as well as the campaign finance system, which has to do, of course, with campaign contributions and expenditures and all the related sorts of things. I've been in elections overall with the state for 15 and a half years. And previous to my current position, I've served as the county director in Newcastle County for many years. So I have been around through a lot of elections and a lot of changes and things of that nature. And I'm just happy that we're able to be here today to talk about these options that we offer to voters with special needs or voters that may experience some additional challenges, perhaps, in ways that we can help ensure that they are able to exercise their right to vote, efficiently, freely, and conveniently.
Absolutely, and I could say firsthand, thank you for the work that you and your team does to ensure that people with disabilities have access to voting and the voting polls and other options that you're going to talk about a little later. But can you tell me what can people expect this year at the polls? The pandemic is kind of, some people say over. I don't agree that it's over. But we know the pandemic is still there. But what can people expect at the polls this year?
Sure. Well, this year we do have some changes that have occurred. I would like to remind everyone that for all voters that we did recently, the General Assembly, following each census, completes a reapportionment, meaning a redistribution, if you will, of the districts based on population. So to encourage all voters to make sure to consult the polling place card they received, because your district may have changed and your polling place may have changed. We also have a number of tools on our website to check that out. If you can go to the voter portal, ivote.de.gov, which appears on our website, elections.delaware.gov. So you have the voter portal, and you also have a GIS-based lookup tool the voters can use to view their districts and their polling places. So that's one change. We do also have this year early voting, which was authorized by the legislature, General Assembly in 2019, but went into effect this year of 2022. So we have had our first statewide election with early voting for the primary, and we'll have it for the general. We have a lot of information about that on our website as well. There are 14 early voting sites in the state of Delaware, and a voter is able to vote at any of those sites in their county. So there are 5 in Newcastle County, including 1 in the city of Wilmington, 4 in Kent, and 5 in Sussex. So definitely consult those information on our website. Those include hours into the evening as well as weekend hours. In fact, early voting is available through Sunday, immediately preceding Election Day, Tuesday. So that's a new way that voters have available to them to exercise their right to vote starting this election season.
Wow, you said a lot there in such a short amount of time. But appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
So speaking of individuals coming to the polls and whether they live in Kent County, Sussex County, or Newcastle County, what should individuals bring with them to ensure that they are ready to vote?
Sure. When voters go to the polling place, voters are requested to show identification. Delaware does not require photo ID, but basically identification that proves an individual's identity and their residence. There are some additional options if the voter runs into challenges with that. Poll workers there, the lead poll worker, inspector, and judges may confer and decide if there is an issue with a voter, perhaps confirming their identity. Also, voters in Delaware, excuse me, voters in Delaware do have the option, if by state law, if they are present at their correct polling place and their name appears on the poll list, and they do not have identification, or they choose not to show identification, they are permitted to sign an affidavit affirming their identity, and they are permitted to vote. Most voters, I will say, just as a practice, will bring something along the lines of a driver's license or a state ID that can be scanned very easily in the poll books, but those are not required. There's no definitive list of ID required, or no ID does not have to be from a certain list. But we just encourage voters to bring ID with them. It just helps speed the process up to get them checked in and get them their vote completed and get them on their way.
So I hate to put you on the spot, but you use the word that I'm familiar with, but some people may not. What exactly is an affidavit? When you say the word affidavit,
Sure.
what does that mean?
Sure. An affidavit basically is a statement that is under penalty of perjury, meaning that you are stating that what is you are declaring on that is truthful, under penalty of law if you are not being truthful. So in those cases where a voter does not have an identification or chooses not to prove one, they are affirming. They're saying, I attest, I affirm, I am saying this is true. I am who I say I am, and I am eligible. I am the person listed here on the poll book. So we want to make sure that voters know, again, that is an option for them by Delaware law. If they're at their correct polling place, there's no, that is certainly an option that is open to them.
Right. So just so we're clear, the affidavit confirms that you are who you are, and if they find out later that you're not who you said you were, then that's where the legal penalties and possible prosecution and things like that can happen.
Right. Yeah. So folks want to be very sure, as with anything connected to voting, since it is obviously certainly it is a right and certainly a privilege, there are those penalties, you're right, that are associated with law if someone were to make a not a truthful statement, in that process. And that's something that is taken seriously, although it's something, thankfully very rarely, if very, very rarely happens, but it is something that our office, our department is very vigilant about, as we take that, very seriously, of course, if something like that were to happen.
Right. Thank you so much for breaking that down there.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of people with disabilities and possibly someone needing assistance and needing some assistance when they get to the polls, what happens when someone gets to the poll and they need that assistance?
Sure.
What does that look like on the day of election?
Sure. Now, Delaware law has multiple options to allow individuals to obtain some assistance if they need it. You could always bring an individual with you to assist you. The only restrictions in Delaware law is that the individual should not be one's employer or from one's union if someone is a unionized worker. Again, the reason that's in the law is just so that there's no concern that someone's vote would be influenced in any way. But you could bring a family member, a friend, a neighbor into the polling booth to assist you if you wish. And you just would notify the poll worker that I have someone here with me, I need some assistance, I'd like this person to accompany me. If you need assistance and you do not have anyone available, with you. Then two poll workers, they would be workers of opposite parties. They may accompany you into the polling booth and to ensure if you need any assistance with indicating your choices on the ballot. Now, those are two options. However, those do involve other individuals. We do realize, of course, and we respect that individual voters certainly would like to exercise their rights and maintain their privacy, certainly. So we do have assistive devices that are compatible with our voting machines. And what I'll do, if I may here, if this will work, I was going to perhaps, actually we can share this later, Emmanuel, an image perhaps of the universal voting console. What this is this is a device that's available at each polling place. It's a handheld device. And
I
the
gave
voters,
you,
no, go ahead, do you have something?
I gave you permission.
Did you give me screen sharing? Okay, great. Let me go ahead and
did.
share. I want to share a page here from our. Oh, I'm getting a disabled message, Emmanuel. Sorry about that.
Try one more time.
One more time. Okay, great. Oh,
No.
gotcha. Let me take a look. Because what I'll do is we're setting. Oh, here we go. I've got it now. Thank you. What I'm going to do, I'm sharing a screen with you now. And this is from our website. And if you go to our website, elections.delaware.gov, one of the options under how do I would be the option for an individual voter who may have special needs. Okay, I'm going to flip back to that page right now just to show you. We're on the Department of Elections main website. And down at the bottom of the site here, you see how do I? And one of the options is vote when I have special needs. And that will bring up this page, which has a ton of info. But I want to draw your attention specifically where my mouse cursor is right now. This is the assistive device, and we have a video. This is a link to a video. As you can see here, it's a handheld device. It has multiple buttons that are differently shaped, different colors. They have raised edges for tactile sensation. There are as well two ports on here, one on the bottom right, where there is a headset, and we do provide those headsets for a audio interpretation of the ballot. And then also here on the bottom left, there is another port where someone may plug in an assistive device. If you have a device such as a sip and puff type of device or some sort of other control device, that's also compatible. So this gives you full control over the ballot. In addition to the audio representation of the ballot, the voting machine itself, and it's controllable through this device or through the assistance of a poll worker, or just directly from the screen of the machine with an assistance of a poll worker. You have the option as a voter to enlarge the size of the ballot. You can, instead of having multiple offices on the screen, you can have a single office on each screen. You can change the contrast. The ballot is normally presented in color, but if that's a challenge to someone visually, you can present that in black and white if that's an easier for contrast purposes. The assistive device here, the Universal Voting Console or the UVC, also gives that voter, in addition, if they do choose to go with the audio presentation of the ballot, they can control the speed of that. And they also, I like to call it, you can kind of dip in and dip out if you'd like to present part of the ballot in audio, but then you'd like to go back and look and view the screen and make a choice on there. You're welcome to do that. And this is available to anyone, and anyone, without question can use this device if they wish. And we encourage folks, certainly to use that if you need to. It gives you the full opportunity to fully participate in the election and to see the ballot or to hear the ballot, whichever is better for you or meets your needs. But then this also, most importantly, as a whole, allows you to vote independently without any assistance from another individual, if that is your preference. Okay. And I'll stop sharing that now, but that's on our website. And again, we have a whole section of our website devoted to resources to voters with special needs.
Wow, that is amazing. We could have did a whole episode just on the accessibility tools at the voting booth, and and I was familiar with the machine, but I didn't realize how in depth that machine went from being able to go back and forth between the two, whether it's audio or whether it's visual. So thank you for that. And those that watching on YouTube, I will put the link to that video in the description for you to take a look at that. And some other accessibility tools here in Delaware. And Commissioner, you already alluded to this a little bit. Speaking of those with visual impairments, so I won't make you go through that whole thing again. But you mentioned being able to use headphones or large font. Is that on every machine, or is that a special machine, or
Sure. That is available on each machine. So each machine has that capability. And this device, the UVC device, is a device that's compatible with any machine. So although we normally have it set up and dedicated to a voting machine in the polling place, it's actually usable on any machine. So although if a voter who has a particular need may come in, we would have the poll workers direct them to a particular machine. But any of those features, even if a UVC is in use, let's say, any of the other voting machines that may not have a UVC directly connected to it, any of those machines can accommodate those changes in the visual display. And we often have individual voters who come in who may request the larger font, the larger presentation of the ballot. Especially in a year when there are the largest number of offices on the ballot, you could have a potentially long ballot. And it does give you the option, again, to show each office individually, which for a lot of folks, they prefer that. And it's very helpful.
So you always do good with like answering my question, but then when you do so good, it kind of leads to another question.
Sure.
So you have those with visual impairments, you have those with disabilities, and trying to navigate the voting place and the booth. What happens when someone comes to the polls who may be disabled, but also English is their second language?
Sure. Although in Delaware, by law, we do not have a requirement for translation into other languages, we do have at some of our polling locations, we do have poll workers, a number of poll workers who have abilities in other languages. Spanish would be primary. Certainly not at every polling place. We do have a relatively limited number, but we are working with some other organizations, and they are assisting us with individuals who are bilingual. And we are working to try to place those individuals at polling places that may have the greatest need. So certainly, and we will do our best to accommodate those needs as well.
Wonderful. I was just thinking in terms of, speaking of all three counties, I know Sussex County is a big area for those that speak, Spanish, and the need for bilingual abilities to be able to do that. So that was a question I kind of put you on the spot there.
That's okay. Something we're trying, doing more on. Although, like I said, we don't have a strict requirement for any translation, and that's always based on census data, just so to give folks a little more background what those requirements are. But we still try to, accommodate as best we can in that regard.
Absolutely, totally understand that. So this is one of the greater questions. You talked about changes, here in Delaware and things that are happening here in Delaware. But one of the biggest changes is one that happened very, very recently.
Sure.
Where the Delaware Supreme Court overturn the ability to vote by mail.
That's right.
One, can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Mhm.
Two, what are the options
Sure.
now? Part of that overturn decision also made it where same day registration is no longer
Right.
available. So
Mhm.
can you talk about before? I know we passed the deadline for registration, but can you talk about that and what that means
Right.
for voters?
Absolutely. Sure. And what that means is that I'd like to actually kind of start answering it in some way that it may be particularly important to those who may be viewing in who are voters with special needs. I'd like to start out by saying that the vote by mail decision did not impact absentee voting in any way. And we know that one of the reasons that is permitted in Delaware law is that voters who are sick or temporarily or permanently physically disabled are permitted to vote by absentee ballot. And there is, in fact, an option for permanent absentee status as well. And we do offer some accessibility tools for the voters with special needs as well when they vote absentee. So we just want to assure everybody that that was not impacted in any way by this decision. That's unimpacted completely. But what the decision did, like you mentioned, Manuel, impacted two key aspects, if you will. There was, for a time, a law that permitted voting by mail, which would be a mail ballot without a requirement for any reason to vote. That was declared unconstitutional, as was a legislation that permitted registration through election day. So that restored the registration deadline to the established deadline. So as we're speaking today, it's the 18th of October. The registration deadline was restored back to the fourth Saturday preceding the election, which was a prior state law. So that means, like, as we're speaking today, of course, we're past the registration deadline for the general. So we did make accommodations for that. You know, our offices were open on election day. We know there were some events in the community that voter registrars were involved with. We honor registrations, applications received physically that day through the 15th, as well as those postmarked by the 15th to allow those who may have been mailed that day to come in. And certainly all those will be processed, and those folks would be eligible. So those were kind of the two primary impacts of that recent court ruling.
Wow, you summed it up so well. So you clarified something which I think is really one, it's really big. Two, when you read the decision, it's kind of misleading in a sense, or not as clear as it could have been for individuals with disabilities. You mentioned that it did not affect the absentee ballots, which I think is something that we really need to get across in this conversation, that even though voting by mail is no longer an option, for now, it's no longer an option here in Delaware, but the ability to vote by absentee ballot is available.
That's
My
correct.
my question to you is that this is not on the list, but my question is, if you had an absentee ballot, or you voted by, last time I voted by electronically, meaning did everything online. What if this year I said, the morning of election day, I'm feeling really good. I got enough face masks to go out and conquer the world. What if I wanted to go to the polls? Am I able to go to the polls, or do I have to follow whatever my original method of
Mhm.
voting was?
No, you do not. No, you do not. Um, Basically, any voter who, even if you requested an absentee ballot and then you decided that you wish to vote in the polling place, you're welcome to do that. If you arrive at your polling place, the poll list or the poll book will note that you have an individual, you have a request in for an absentee ballot. However, you have not returned that. Now, I should stop for a second and just say, if you do have an absentee ballot and you in fact returned it already, and you did go to a polling place, you will be stopped and you'll be told
Right.
that, of course, you've already voted. But if you've not returned it, you are permitted to vote. And then what we'll do is, once you vote at the polling place after you're checked in, that's noted, and then the ballot that was issued, that will be voided. So even if by chance there was an accident, misunderstanding, someone forgot and they did in fact mail it, or they mailed it late and they were concerned that it would not be received in time, because when we are a ballot in hand state, that absentee ballot has to be received by the time the polls close on election day. If someone was concerned about that and then ultimately decided to go to the polling place, we do have mechanisms where that would ensure the voter only voted once, and that the absentee ballot in this case would be voided and would not be counted. So you do have that flexibility.
Absolutely. No. Now, if you go to the voting place, does that cancel your ability in future elections to vote absentee?
No, it does not. And just to clarify on the absentee there, Manuel, just a couple things I wanted to mention. As I said earlier, individuals who qualify to vote by absentee ballot for the reason of being sick or perhaps having a disability, you do have that option to vote to go to a permanent absentee status, meaning that you'll receive a ballot for every election for which you're eligible. And we will continue to do that until you notify us otherwise as a voter. Unless you indicate that you no longer wish to receive it, or if we do in fact receive an item returned in the mail. For example, say someone moved and didn't update their address with us. If something's returned, that would stop that. But just assuming that didn't happen, you would continue to be a permanent absentee voter for the rest of your life until you told us otherwise. But that never precludes you from being able to go to the polling place. Again, it's your choice. If you choose to, if you get that ballot and you say, you know what, I just want to go to the polling place this time, I'm going to try that out. Go right ahead. And that will not mean that you're removed from a permanent status. You have to affirmatively tell us that you want to be removed from permanent status before we would do that.
So my last question is what we call an invisible question, because it's not on the list. Speaking of people voting and getting a ballot, is there an online ballot that people could look at to know like not necessarily who to vote for, but who was listed on that ballot, that they could like look at it and say, okay, I know who I want to vote for. I may have short-term memory loss, or I may have a brain injury, or I may need a user screen reader and want to mark my answers, online, and then know when I get to the voting place, I want to vote for candidate strawberry versus candidate banana.
Right, sure. Yes, we do have a couple options for that. You can vote, you can view that in your the voter portal on our website, which is ivote.de.gov. That's available on our website. That has a login where that basically has you verify your identity, through a credential like the state ID or a driver's license if you have a driver's license, and you can log in and view all sorts of aspects, including a sample ballot, including your voting history. Or you could just go to our website, elections.delaware.gov, and we have tools on there to help you look up your district. You can simply if you don't wish to log into that voter portal, you can just enter your address. It'll show you districts, and then we have listings there of all the sample ballots to show what's on your ballot. And just this may seem like an obvious thing, but I always like to mention it. For a general election, course, any voter can vote, regardless of party affiliation, whether you're affiliated with a party or not. So the sample ballot that you view for your district, what we call election districts in Delaware, some areas call them precincts, but your ballot is going to be the same for everyone who lives there in that district, regardless of party. So whatever you're looking at, that's going to be the ballot you see on election day, either in the voting machine, or if you do choose to vote by absentee, those offices will be, although the format looks a little different how it's laid out, it's the same content on an absentee ballot that you complete and return by mail, or return via one of the electronic delivery options if you choose that accessibility tool, which we have available as well.
Wow, thank you so much. You not only answered my questions on my sheet, but those that I'm inspired to ask after we start talking. So I appreciate that. So are all voting places accessible for those with disabilities?
Right, we do. One of the prerequisites, one of the requirements for a facility to serve as a polling place is that they are accessible. And we realize, we're working with a lot of different types of buildings, a lot of buildings of different ages. Certainly there are buildings that we don't necessarily control. Some are facilities managed by the state, maybe a school or a community center, but many are not. Many are churches, could be private entities. But there is a prerequisite that the building be accessible. And we do provide, and the poll workers set this up on election day, we do provide signage to indicate where an accessible entrance is. We have signage to help mark parking for voters that's accessible, that's close to the entrance of the building. And we just kind of do our best all the time. It's always a work in progress in buildings that we have to ensure they're as accessible as possible. We work with the building owners to make sure of that, to make sure the path that voters take is the most logical, the most convenient, path, but while being accessible as well.
Wow, thank you for that. So you mentioned like signage for like parking and locating where things are. And I didn't ask this, in the beginning of our conversation. But what happens if someone at the poll needs ASL sign language interpretation? Is that available in the on the booth itself, or does someone have to be there to sign to help someone who may be deaf or hard of hearing?
Sure. For someone, right, for someone who's in that situation, we do not just because of the availability of individuals, with that skill, we don't have that offered at polling places. Not something that we offer, but again, certainly if an individual needs assistance, like I was mentioning earlier, and they'd like to bring someone with them, and maybe that's the type of assistance they need, would be ASL, would be sign language. That's certainly welcome. Again, it goes along with that voter being able to bring someone with them to assist, however they need assistance.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So my last final question is an easy one. Do you have any final comments or information that you would like to share with the audience?
Sure, thank you. And what I would encourage everyone, you make sure you visit our website, elections.delaware.gov. We have a ton of information on the site for voters, a lot of resources, a lot of educational materials and tools, tutorials, things like that. So just encourage folks to visit the site, familiarize themselves, with their ballot, with candidates on the ballot, with their polling location, with options available to them, including absentee. And certainly encourage, if you have any questions, if a voter does not get an answer they need based on what's on the website or on our social media channels, such as Facebook and Instagram, things like that, feel free to contact our office. There's contact information on the website, and you can contact the elections office for the county in which you live, and they'll be happy to assist you.
All right, you heard it here first. Well, let's talk about it. I want to thank Commissioner Albans for stopping by once again. As we get closer to November the 8th, which is election day here in Delaware. Thank you for all the information and thank you for the continued partnership that I believe that we have built to ensure that all people have access to the voting booth on the day of election day. And if they're not able to get to the voting booth, that they have those options available to them. So thank you for that. For those that are watching on YouTube, if you have not already, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode of the Let's Talk About It. Again, my name is Emmanuel. Until next time, be safe, be well, and don't forget to vote, vote, vote. Bye-bye, everybody.